In the last video, we looked at physical properties. This time we're going to look at chemical properties of matter. A chemical property is the ability to produce change in the composition of matter. It's the ability to change one substance into a totally different substance. So, there's two main properties that are chemical properties. One of them is flammability. Basically, it's how easy is it for something to catch on fire. Clearly, there are some materials that catch on fire very quickly, and there's other materials that don't catch on fire very quickly. So, for example, gasoline has very high flammability. It catches on fire very quickly. Water doesn't catch on fire. It doesn't have a flammability. It just doesn't. So, again, the ability for something to catch on fire is flammability. Reactivity is another thing. Reactivity is how quickly it is for something to combine with something else, or sometimes it actually decomposes. But basically, if you mix two chemicals together, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to react. However, if you mix other chemicals together, they'll react instantly. Later on, I'm almost pretty positive I'm going to show you sodium and water. Sodium is a metal, and when I put that in water, it blows up, kind of like what you see in this picture right here. It just blows up right away. But if I put a piece of copper metal in water, it doesn't do anything. Copper is very unreactive. It has a very low reactivity. So again, flammability is how easy it is for something to catch on fire. Reactivity is how quickly it is for certain elements or compounds or whatever to combine and react with something else. In the other lesson, we talked about physical changes. Physical changes are changes to the properties that don't change the actual substance. So, for example, if you freeze water, yeah, it turns ice, but ice is still water. It doesn't change. It's still water. If I rip a piece of paper or if I fold a piece of paper, it's still paper. A chemical change, on the other hand, occurs when one substance reacts with another and it changes into a completely different substance. So, this is when I start with one thing and I create something totally different. This involves the breaking and forming of chemical bonds, which we'll talk about in another unit. So how do you know when there's a chemical change? Well, these are not guaranteed, it doesn't have to be all four of these. But for the most part, if a material changes color, that is a chemical change. Now don't mistake that with if I take a piece of paper and use a marker and color in a picture, that's not a chemical change. That's still a physical change. But a chemical change can change the color of something. So for example, nails, iron nails, even cars. Iron will react with the oxygen in the air, and what happens is iron and oxygen create iron 3 oxide, which is called rust. So this gray nail turns into this kind of like rust. I don't want to say rusty, but it is rust. It's a brownish red kind of material. That's rust. It changed color. It went from gray to a brownish red. So that was a change in color. That was a chemical change occurred. Gas can be given off. So a lot of times, if you burn something, you see black smoke. Here's a reaction. This is probably hydrogen peroxide decomposing and gives off, again, some kind of gas. That is a sign of a chemical change. A precipitate can form. A precipitate is if you mix two liquids together, a solid is created. Probably not going to see that in this class. That's more in regular chemistry. The last one is light and heat can be given off. So whenever you burn something, whenever there's a fire, fire gives off light and heat. That is also a good indication that there is chemical change. If anyone's ever had those glow sticks where you kind of snap them and it starts to glow right away, light's been given off. That is a chemical change. So just to show a little quick video on this, let's see if I can find Safari. There it is. We have a match here, and then it's composed of different elements, but as soon as you start burning that match, oh, it's got to load. So as soon as you get done burning the match, it's going to change colors, which that was really quick. There you go. It changed colors completely. It went from like this brown and a green top to all black. Basically, this changed into carbon. This is when you burn stuff, it turns to charcoal. That's essentially carbon. Usually there's a smell, like I said, it releases gas, releases light. It can give off or take in heat. So again, when you burn something, as you see here, it's giving off heat and it's giving off light. So whenever you burn something, that's a chemical change. That's a pretty obvious one. Example of another chemical change that doesn't give off light or heat, but change the colors when leaves change. When leaves go from green to orange or yellow or red, that also is a chemical change. So those are just examples of chemical changes. We'll see a lot more in the classroom.